and on behalf of the Archdiocese of San Francisco, welcome to Mosaic. Today we encounter the newest and perhaps the liveliest initiative of the Archdiocese of San Francisco and its leader, Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone. This is called the Benedict XVI Institute. If you remember your Roman numerals, that 16 is XVI. It's named for the Pope Emeritus Benedict Institute, XVI, and this institute has a special mission. They put their mission this way. In an obsessively driven America focused on the utilitarian, the busy, the productive, the special mission of the Benedict XVI Institute is to open the door of beauty to God. Now, we do this through two great strategies: providing practical resources for more beautiful sacred music and liturgy in parishes, and by energizing a Catholic culture of the arts by connecting artists, audiences, and patrons of the arts. San Francisco is our home under the leadership of Archbishop Cordileone. What we learn in the practice of serving the fabulous metropolitan Bay Area, we seek to offer to the whole people of God throughout America and beyond. That's quite some mission statement. And today we talk with the director of the Benedict XVI Institute about their mission, their plans, and their already numerous liturgical, artistic, and intellectual achievements. So after this brief break, please rejoin us to see where we can find that doorway of beauty that leads to God. Hello again and welcome to Mosaic. Let me introduce our guest today. Her name is Maggie Gallagher. Maggie, welcome to Mosaic.
John, I'm so glad to be here.
And you've been with the Archdiocese for a year and a half?
Year and a half.
Okay, so it's a new initiative. It's the Benedict XVI Institute. I think it already has a nickname. We call it B16?
Sometimes we do, especially online.
When we shorten it. So this is an initiative of Archbishop Cordileone responding to a felt need for more beauty, more sacredness in liturgy and Catholic arts, and a general expansion of Catholic arts engagement somehow. And you're charged with overseeing this. How does it all work?
Well, you know, Pope Benedict, who we are named for, once said, when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, that the only really great apologetics for the Church, apology for the Church, are the saints she produces and the great art that was nurtured in her womb. And for centuries, Catholicism has been a massively creative culture in which truth, goodness, but also beauty were understood to be the three faces of God.
Yes.
And we seem to have, in the last 50 years, started to treat beauty, including sacred beauty, as a kind of frill or extra or decoration. But it changes lives, it converts heart, it brings the peace of God in an extraordinary way. And so the Archbishop charged us with understanding what are the barriers to bringing, reviving or renewing great sacred beauty, particularly in our local parishes, and how can we help overcome them with practical resources.
You know, and I'm an old enough Catholic to have seen that shift, and many people have noted it. Some complained about it, some not, but there's been a kind of detour from centuries of traditional beauty in the liturgy, particularly, into experiments that maybe haven't worked out so well because their depth is shallow, if I can say
listen,
that.
Some people really love them, particularly people of a certain generation. And we're not here to take away anything that's bringing you closer to God, but it's very clear there is a deep hunger in the younger generation for things that are timeless and beautiful and that uplift the heart to God in a way that for many of us, you know, the Breaking Bread manual doesn't really do it. But we work in both forms.
Yes.
We're happy to work in English. We'll help you if you want help with the Latin Mass.
Yeah.
But our goal is to just reintroduce people to this sacred beauty, and we're finding that the response is amazing, right? There's a lot of people who say, I had a musician in Corpus Christi in the East Bay. He's a cellist with a local symphony as well as a music director at a Catholic church. And when he invited the teaching choir out, he said, I just heard Hildegard von Bingen, Saint Hildegard, and I never heard her before. Like, here's a trained musician.
Yeah.
And he said, I was just blown away, and he wanted to bring that back to his parish.
Now, I'd like to get to this because it sounds as if to create great art, as the Catholics have done in the past for liturgies, we start to think of Bach's B minor Mass or complex things, but what your group has gone out and done, as I understand it, is retrieve Gregorian chant. And Gregorian chant is single, not even harmonized, single melody, singular or group singing, easy to learn, beautiful to perform. Am I right? And tell me.
This is the amazing thing. One of the barriers is people think Gregorian chant is hard, and there are some versions, particularly the sacred polyphony, that only a professional should attempt.
Okay.
But for thousands of years, ordinary people who could not only could they not read music, they couldn't even read.
Yeah.
Learned how to do this. It's very intuitive. It's something deeply satisfying about doing it together. And it's prayer, not performance.
Prayer, not performance. Let me ask for the first slideshow we have here, if I can, please. Gregorian chant, and we'll linger on these photos a little bit. Now, Maggie, here are some happy-looking children. Is that Gregorian chant in front of them?
Well, we have this amazing children's chant specialist, Mary Ann Carr Wilson, who in 5 days can teach children to chant a whole Latin Mass. And I saw her do this with like 30 kids from the ages of 7 to 16. And in a day and a half, she can do something simpler that will, not quite the full thing.
And I think this is a record from last summer, your first chant camp, children's chant summer camp.
Yeah.
It sounds good. It sounds good. And
well,
the next
if you want one in your parish, just go to benedictinstitute.org and contact us, because we're trying to bring this in the Bay Area at a cost of free.
Yes.
If we have the right commitment to do the organization for
So it's available. Let me run through let's see the next slide if we can. Now, I'll tell you, I know what this is. Down at Stanford, you had a chant workshop for grown-ups. They came. These are the teachers, and you can tell us later who they were. Next slide is, again, the group gathered at Stanford. There were 2 of these workshops, learning Gregorian chant, and they only spent, 4 hours, 3 hours?
Yeah, and then we did Vespers.
And you did a Vespers, and if we see the next slide is, the performance of Vespers. And as you say, this is prayer, not performance, the praying of Vespers. So, and is there one more slide to show for the Gregorian? Yeah, now this is interesting.
Cool.
Here it is. Benedict XVI Institute at San Quentin. So in a minute's time, our segment is almost over. Begin to tell me about the San Quentin Scola and this project.
The Archbishop Corleone likes to say once we launched the teaching choir, the very first take-up was the Catholic chaplain at San Quentin, which is a Catholic community.
Yes.
We brought our Scola to sing for them, and 35 guys signed up to form their own Latin Mass Scola. Yeah. So we're rehearsing with them. We did our first Latin Mass there. And as one of the prisoners said to me, one of the men said to me, I really don't want to be here, but if I have to be here, I want to be in here listening to music like that. And
this story that we showed the slide from, that was a local story, but there was national news, and the local papers got it too. So this is a story that's so refreshing and so welcome to know that, I mean, what are you doing while you're in prison serving your time? If you can sing Gregorian chant, pray, a wonderful pastime. Hello and welcome back to Mosaic. Our guest today is Maggie Gallagher, director of the Benedict XVI Institute for the Archdiocese of San Francisco. And her purview is music, liturgy, beauty, and we'll find out later, intellect and the arts as well. So we've just talked about Gregorian chant, a simple art form that your group is teaching to schools, to parishes, to a bunch of prisoners at San Quentin who welcome it. Now, you've also commissioned a much more complex piece of liturgical music, and this had its premiere recently. It's called Mass of the Americas. So tell us about that, the genesis and so on. Let me show some slides so people get a flavor of what it was. Can we see the slides up here of Mass of the Americas? There's the familiar plaza of the cathedral, and next we see something unusual, Aztec dancers on the plaza. And now we go on to, there they are, more Aztec dancers in their uniforms.
They're pretty photogenic.
In their costumes. And the next slide, we have the Catholic bishop and priests in their uniforms, in their costumes. Here we come with the next slide. And there's this massive choir and instruments and so on who performed the Mass. So and the next slide, please. And they're unusual. That's the Virgin Mary, Our Lady of Guadalupe, and Juan Diego, to whom she spoke in 1521, carrying up the bread and wine for the offertory gifts at the Mass. And the next slide is, now this is the solo performance of the communion meditation, which is the Ave Maria in the Aztec language, Nahuatl, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And our next slide, the Eucharist, which unites all the people in attendance in the church. And I think there's one more to look at. And there it is, the genesis of this whole thing. And that is Frank LaRocca, the composer of the Mass of the Americas. And leaning over his shoulder, I don't know if that's his lyricist or is that...
That's the first time the Archbishop got to kind of hear what Frank was doing in the Mass.
And that's Archbishop Cordileone. Thank you for those slides.
Definitely. Frank LaRocca, the composer.
To say that Archbishop Cordileone runs the Benedict XVI Institute with your management, and you commissioned this Mass, right?
Yes, Frank LaRocca is our composer in residence. This is long, the Archbishop has long had this dream of taking, instead of doing, as we sometimes do at Mass, a little bit of this person's culture and a little bit of that person's culture, bringing together, in this case, the Mexican folk hymns to Mary, and kind of elevating them from the popular into the great sacred music tradition. And that really is what Frank LaRocca accomplished. And that, you saw that was this Saturday, Saturday, December 8th, it premiered. And that is, of course, the Feast of Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception. And it is also the day, the Saturday before her actual feast day, where there is this enormous celebration, which is where the Aztec dancers, and there's horses, and most of Latino Catholic San Francisco is aware there's a march, a 12-mile pilgrimage through the streets. It's really quite something. And it was the perfect occasion for this intertwined tribute to Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception, who is the patroness of the United States, and Our Lady of Guadalupe, who is the patroness of both Mexico and all the Americas.
And let me just say, I was present for this thing. If a viewer happened to miss it, you can see it on our website. You can see it on our YouTube channel. You can go to the Benedict XVI website. It was broadcast by EWTN TV live, and you can see the video and enjoy the music. It's just really, really, really wonderful.
We have a great thank you. If you go to benedictinstitute.org and click on the liturgy button, and then press on the Mass of the Americas, there's about 5 or 6 videos that have been audio engineered, and so you can hear them better than from the live television feed. And particularly the first one, the Ave Maria, Ave Maria in the Aztec language, is incredibly haunting. And if you want a taste of what Frank LaRocca and Sacred Beauty can do, that would be a good place to start.
It's a gorgeous Mass, and Frank calls himself a classical composer, which he is, but he infiltrated it with folk melodies and cultural business from the North America, South America, and the Latin tradition. And
yes, it's
wonderful.
It's in Spanish, Latin, English, and Nahuatl, right? So this is the first time we believe that Nahuatl has ever been incorporated into the Mass.
And so we premiered December 8th in San Francisco at the cathedral. Where has it been since, and where's it going? Well,
February 28th. So this is the great thing. That, you know, all the great masses musical masses that you hear now, mostly and sadly, in concert halls, were born in the bosom of the church and moved and found their audiences through the church. And we're excited that this is happening with the Mass of the Americas. Most composers never get a second performance of any original work, and that 3,000 people in that made that the largest new music event of the 21st century, most likely. We had our international premiere, our Mexican premiere in Tijuana on February 28th with Archbishop Moreno and Archbishop Cordileone. And that was an amazing experience. Marianne Carr-Wilson took her San Diego singers to a liturgy conference. So this is a national liturgy conference, and they all heard this great Mass, and we're hoping that we'll be able to go on tour in Mexico at some point. We also have on November 16th, the Basilica Shrine of Our Lady of Immaculate Conception will be
in Washington,
D.C., in that beautiful church there that they've just completed. So we're working with several other places, frankly. it's kind of been extraordinary, the response to it, I have to say.
And we know that people can see it on YouTube or on your website. They can see bits of it or the whole broadcast. But what about a recording? Would that be an audio
We
recording?
definitely would like to do a professional recording. In fact, I promised it to Frank LaRocca, was part of the deal. The acoustics at St. Mary's make it challenging to do a live recording. So we're still working on that and looking at it. But eventually, yeah, you should be able to get it on CD. And by the way, Frank is working, well, right now he's working on each liturgical season needs a new ending hymn, and he's working on those, Marion, and then he's going to do in November a Requiem Mass for the Homeless Dead.
Oh, wonderful.
So
that's wonderful.
You'll have more opportunities to hear him, and if you never have, you really should. It's
good to know. Frank was on the show, and we chatted with him and got to know him. So Maggie, let's take another break. When we come back, we'll talk about the further expansion of the Benedict XVI's purview into literature and all the arts. Hello and welcome back. We're learning more about the Benedict XVI Institute, San Francisco Archdiocese's Catholic Culture Initiative. Maggie Gallagher is telling us all about it. Now, Maggie, we've talked about music and liturgy, things that happen in church. There's more to your basket of tricks, and I've been privy to, be it some of them, intellectual moments, poetry, performances, all kinds of things that aren't taking place in the church, but that are
they tend to be taking place in the church basement, but occasionally at
basement.
Stanford.
That's right, that's right. Yeah. Now, speaking of Stanford, yes, you had Dana Gioia and Anthony Esselin, and we're talking about poetry and Catholic poetry. You mentioned that somehow in the last few decades, Catholic worship has taken a turn, for the pedestrian. So we're bringing back the beauty. And I hear the same plaint about Catholic arts and literature, and you're working on supplying that.
Well, I think that there's no good reason why a culture as deep and rich, and a faith as deep and rich in ours, is not producing a lot more creatively. And we've looked for ways to help foster the kind of community out of which encourages the next generation of artists. We founded a magazine, Catholic Arts Today.
I wanted to mention that Catholic Arts Today online magazine, no print issue, but if you go to the benedictinstitute.org website, wonderful magazine, wonderful articles covering all the arts.
And the first two young, so yes, and our focus is primarily on the work and the lives of living Catholic artists, to show people that we are out there and to encourage the next generation that there is an audience for this, that you can make it. And we were so pleased. Our first two promotional videos featuring young Catholic artists were both nominated for Emmys.
And these are videos on your magazine, on your website.
Yeah, if you go to the web page, it's the first big videos that pop up.
I had a nice photo of you all in your good clothes at the Emmys in New York, and I'd forgot to include it in the
That was the Chicago Emmys. The New York Emmys are in May, I think.
Ah, okay, you'll be there.
We'll be
Let
there.
me ask for our last slideshow. It's a brief one. And this is the René Girard confabulation at St. Ignatius Church. So this was a study or a seminar on the work of the famous Stanford professor and Catholic theologian and psychologist, René Girard. So who do we have here? Jody Bottom, Gloria Haven, the biographer, Cynthia Haven, James Matthew Wilson, poet, and the artist from Brooklyn.
Alphonse Borisuch.
And they came and shared their art and their knowledge of René Girard. About 3 hours here at
Well, it was really an amazing event. James Matthew Wilson read us an original poem. Jody Bottom read us a poem he wrote for René Girard that René Girard read. We had a painter who does sacred modern
and his
painting,
work was on display there.
We had samples of his work on display there, Alphonse Borisuch. And the topic was René Girard and the Catholic artist, because among the other things that I noticed when I was reading Cynthia Haven's excellent biography
of
The
Girard.
Evolution of Desire, and you should have her on as a guest, by the way, she's amazing, is that he began as a professor of French literature.
Right.
He was actually trained in that.
Right.
And there was just this amazing outburst of energy. The people who in the audience could easily have been up there on the podium. The turnout was great, and then we had a kind of salon afterwards at the Archbishop's. It was really an amazing event.
And I want to say that was sort of high intellect, you know, really, really major stuff. But then you've done things on the parish level where you've done sort of staged readings at parishes of famous works, and you had a good time.
We had a great time on Fat Tuesday, being in ancient Athens, reading. I edited a version of Plato's Symposium, so it could be performed, basically. And it was a totally new experience, don't you think, to experience it in that way, which is, I think, much more the way Plato meant than, you know, kind of sitting in a philosophy room, scrolling over it.
Yeah, and I want to say this. I mean, the music you're covering, the arts you're covering, but you always have a, how do you, you want to get it down to the parish level. You want to supply music, you want to supply training, and these little parish fests at which people do a staged reading of something, it's so communal, you know, it really feels...
It's the sense of community and the sense of doing, people say, oh, people want a challenge. That's not it. We're so driven by distraction and entertainment. People want to feel something, they're doing something deeply meaningful together. These things shouldn't work, but I've already had requests from several other places in the Bay Area to do the Plato Symposium. And by the way, if any of your listeners would like us to come to their parish, go to benedictinstitute.org and contact us, because that's our goal, is to get out there and find partners who are interested in what we do. Whether you want to bring our teaching choir out to help your parish, or start a schola where there isn't one, or do a children's chant camp, or host one of our events, we're looking for partners.
Let's be clear, you will go deal with parishes in a different diocese? You don't have to be in the San Francisco Archdiocese?
Well, for these kinds of events, we are dealing in the broader Bay Area. So Bishop Barber's on our board too. And that is our first. Now, our children's chant programs can travel depending on demand. But I'll tell you this, our basic business model is free or very low cost in the Bay Area. And we make those outside of the Bay Area cover the cost.
That sounds great. So Maggie, I only have a few seconds left. I want to thank you for being here. And for really, in the beginning I said it's the liveliest initiative. I want people to know that Catholic arts, culture, and intellect can be lots of fun. I haven't had so much fun since being an employee of this diocese. So thank you very much for joining us on Mosaic, and we'll see you next time.